Hi everybody. It's my third time in a year and a half. So every time I get a new book, here I come. Thank you, Tony. I just want to pray to start with. Lord God, it's a strange world we're living in, Lord, and it's important that people are guided towards the truth, Lord. And I just pray, Lord, that everything that comes out of my lips is the truth, is your truth, and will point people to you, Lord. There's nothing else that's as important. So, Lord, we just pray for your Spirit to be here with all of us, with me and for everyone else. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Yes, right. So about 6 months ago, God gave me a word. Was Isaiah 41, which is comfort my people. And I was thinking, well, I've been writing about Jewish people for 20 years, so what should I do that was different? But I realised that he wanted me to go sort of deeper, and and the only way, honestly, that we can comfort our people is to point them to the Messiah. It is something that has been a real issue. I mean, as far as I know, there may be lots of secret disciples of God from the Jewish community, but mostly you don't hear of it. I don't hear of many new Jews coming through. My mum started the Tree of Life congregation, and Tony was one of the early pastors about 30 years ago. And at that time, about 30% of the congregation were Jewish. And the Tree of Life is still around, but when I look, I think, we've got one here and that's about it. There's just not many. And so I knew I had to write something for that purpose. And one thing that really impacted me is that there was a survey done in the Jewish community. And it was quite enlightening and perhaps counter for what we actually had believed about what Jews actually do believe, because as a result of this survey, it turns out that 25% of all Jews are atheists, and only a third of Jews follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And only about 20% would consider themselves sort of, we call frum, religious. Quite a small number. And I was thinking, most people are put off to evangelize the Jews because they just think that every Jew knows the scripture so well, and that we're never going to manage it. The fact is that most Jews you're going to meet won't know anything about. Be pretty clueless. And so, what does that say? It tells us that there should be no difference in the way that you evangelize the Jews to anyone else. In a sense, that's true. You'd use the same arguments, to talk about, how the evil that's in the heart of man and the need for a Messiah, etc., etc. But of course, there is a difference, and that is 2,000 years of history, and you can't just get over that. Every Jew has this, even if they're secular. They know their biggest enemy is the church. It's just terrible to think that. But that, tried to be a Messianic Jew and living in Israel, I've, lately, as a result of this new sort of mandate, I've spoken to Jewish leaders, and I'm just finding a real cynicism towards Christians, particularly Jewish Christians. I don't care what you say to me. You just want to convert me, don't you? And you think, something. It's the only hope you're going to have is to be converted. And the fact that you are very dubious about my motives, the fact is that I would only want the best for you. Not that I'm an evangelist, and I'm no good at it anyway. But the fact that they see that as a problem just shows you what has happened. They have been sold a Jesus that does not exist. The Jesus that they've encountered over 2,000 years, that they supposedly killed, is not the Jesus that we know. It's not the Jewish Jesus who died for us. It's a false Jesus. So I wrote a book, decided to write a book. The book here, Why Us? the Jewish question. The primary audience for that is to give it to a Jewish person, and what it will do is it will tell them about themselves, but it'll also tell them about the church, and it will tell them why Christians seem to hate them. Jewish people just accept it as one of those things, which makes it hard for you, but you are not like the other Christians. You don't hate Jews, but the default is that they think you do. So why has the church been so hateful towards the Jews? Well, we know about replacement theology, and this book just lays it all out. It says this is why Christians have hated the Jews, and it explains it, warts and all, which means any Christian reading it is also going to be enlightened, because we have a problem with the church as well. You know, we have a dual problem. We have a problem with the church that doesn't get the Jews, and we have the problem with Jews that don't get the church. So in the book, I'm trying to address both. So it's quite an interesting journey I've been on. So that's just been out for the last couple of weeks. And I had some spare time over Christmas, so I wrote 2 booklets as well, which is stuff taken from the book, but just little booklets that you can give to people. It'll take them under an hour to read. One is to give to Jews, and it has no religious bits in it. And the other one is to Christians, and it hits them hard about, you know, replacement theology and the errors of it. So, okay, well that's just that's advert over, but it's all connected to my journey, because back in let's say back in June or July. Let's say everything's been getting worse. I mean, it's worse now than when I was here before, whenever it was, a year ago. Anti-Semitism has now become an accepted default in our society. It's not queried anymore. It's almost, you know, sort of expected, and it certainly isn't. It certainly isn't punished. You know, and I'll explain why, and I'll give you one particular instance of it. What really affected me, June or July, and probably a lot of you here, is what happened at Glastonbury. And just to tell you, if you don't know, at Glastonbury, this man got on the stage who was unknown up to that point, but now he's very well known because of what he did. And he was a black chap with a very posh name, actually, but he's hiding behind a stage name, and he simply just strutted up and down the stage after really talking about his Jewish boss in really disgusting terms to an audience. He then made up this little chant that says "deaf, deaf to the IDF," and that was bad. If that wasn't bad enough, the audience were singing along with it. They had a new song, and they sang it without any self-awareness at all. It was just another song. The BBC broadcast it, so that became that. Even though the BBC were told off and they took it off the iPlayer, it was too late. It is everywhere, and I see it everywhere. I see, because I'm very much on social media, and I see it, and it became a meme, you know, and it's there, and it's in the. And you know something, there's a few of you here who are black, you know, and I'm saying that because I gave this talk to a black church yesterday, because I teach with the Redeemed Church of God, you know, the Nigerian church, on Zoom, and I said this, and I said, can you imagine if a white man strutted on the stage and said, "Deaf, deaf to all black people"? I mean, what would you feel personally? And then when you heard all the white people in the audience agreeing and singing it, and it's going around the world, and you know something, it was reported to the local police in Gloucestershire, or wherever it was, and just a couple of weeks ago they concluded it wasn't a hate crime. Would you believe it? You know, so that's the situation that we're living in, and we have to live with that, and it's going to get harder and harder. Even, you know, last week, Holocaust Memorial Week, most of you will probably know what happened on the day when the BBC, every news programme, every chat show and all that, they said 6 million people, you know. 6 million people, and I've seen a compilation, and it was the same script with whoever it was. So it was obviously deliberate. It wasn't an accident. If they're talking about people, then they would be including the gypsies and the homosexuals and all that, and it would be like 11 million. So the fact is they are talking about the Jews, but not mentioning the Jews. It may seem very subtle, and to those who don't have the radar as we do, it may seem like nothing, but it's just one more thing added on to everything else. I was due to speak at an HMD last Thursday at a local church in Barking, and it was cancelled at the last minute because the parish council didn't want any trouble. Do you believe? It's a Holocaust Memorial Day talk, and they didn't want any trouble from the community. And in the end, I spoke in the public library, So, it's a real battle, and I never thought that it would have got as bad as it has, and it's going to get worse. So, we have to deal with it. But I'm not going to talk about anti-Semitism because part of the idea of this book is to tell Jewish people that they are special to God. You are special to God. People call you the chosen people as a pejorative, as a negative thing. But the fact is that God has chosen the Jewish people and never unchose them. And we see that with Abraham and later on with Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai in Exodus 19, where he basically chooses them and asks them, do you want to be chosen? And they say yes. And from that point onwards, they were like cemented, the relationship was cemented. And it's never been taken back, wherever the church might say, they haven't been replaced. The Jewish people are still chosen. And that chosenness is interesting because it is so obvious to anyone. You don't have to be religious, you don't have to be a Christian or a Jew to realise that 0.22% of the population hit way above their weight, usually by a factor of 100 or more. In terms of a quarter of all Nobel Prizes have been won by Jewish people. That's 25% from a 0.22%, and you can go on and on and on. And so, I point it out in the book, and it makes the Jewish people think there is something special there. But I think it goes a lot further. The scripture in Isaiah 49, Isaiah 49:6, very simple. It's just, see if I can find it. So Isaiah 49 is to Jewish people, to Christians, any Christian will look at that and say, Isaiah is talking about Jesus. And yes, you can see that it is very applicable to Jesus, but Jewish people have always thought it was applicable to themselves. So just to go straight to verse 6, I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. A light to the Gentiles. I believe that Israel, not Jesus as well, because, in the sense it's a type of Jesus, but even now, Israel, Jewish people, are a light to the Gentiles, are a light to the world, not just Gentiles, but to everyone. And let me explain, because think about what's happened over the last 2 years, or 2 and a bit years. What has happened is, with Israel, because of what they've gone through, they have shone a light into the darkness, into areas that have been covered up for years and years. People now have seen Islam exposed for the sense that they worship death, not life. It's exposed the fact that Jewish people worship life to such an extent that the winning soldiers were sacrificed, in a horrible sense, in order to protect some of the Palestinian civilians by giving them, sort of warning of that they're going to come. So, the terrorists knew when the Israelis were going to come and lay the booby traps, etc. There's such a reverence for life. The hostages, Hostage Square. Look at throughout the world how Jewish people, even they weren't happy till the last dead hostage was back. You won't get that with anyone else. And think of the hostage before. Was it Shalit? Was it Shalit? Who was captured on 10 or 20 years ago. In the end, when they got him back from Gaza, they had to swap him with like over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. That is their reverence for life. That was the light was shone into that. But more than that, think of all the institutions now that people are now querying. The UN, and I'm sure a lot is going to come out of that. And I know UN are now complaining that they're going bankrupt because America has taken funds away from politicians. We've seen how two-faced our politicians are. We've seen their decisions and how their decisions are not made for the good of the people, certainly not made for the good of Israel, the Jewish people, but because of a short-term sort of desire to keep in power and to appease the far left and the Islamists in their areas. We've seen the BBC. We got to keep drumming away at things like I've just mentioned what the BBC did, and I'm sure a lot of more eloquent people than me, sort of commentators are out there, are pushing and showing the world exactly, can you trust who you think you can trust? The fact that during the last 2 years, no one wanted to believe the IDF with all the reports they said what was actually happening in Gaza. Instead, virtually the whole world decided to believe on the propaganda. And the reason why they did that was because they still had a feeling that all those institutions which have been around for years and years and years are to be trusted. UN, BBC, Oxfam, Save the Children, Greenpeace, on and on and on. And what we would say is, all those, they're all united in hatred for Israel. They always have been. So the light has been shone into that hatred because sensible people are waking up to this and seeing that the stuff that Israel was saying was actually true. And if that's true, then why did we all believe a lie? And it makes people query all the stuff that they thought was real and to be trusted. Oh, should we all sing and dance? Someone's I'll wait until the music's over. That's right. So shining a light into the world, and there's probably lots of things that's still to come. I'm not saying that Israel, did it on purpose, but it has happened as a result of what happens on October the 7th, is that we can look at the people on the left. The fact that they were so quick to show their hatred to Israel, dressing it as love for the Palestinians, it's now absolutely clear to even the most non-partisan person that all those marches were a sham. And who's marching for Iran? It's, and I think about half the number that was supposedly killed by the Israelis have now already been killed by the Iranian regime, of their own people, and yet not a single left-leaning commentator, celebrity have spoken up. Where's Greta when you need her? she's probably in Dubai or Qatar, sort of having a really good time. All this is being exposed, and it needed to be. So, Israel has a role to play. Jewish people have a role to play. They have some people know this, a principle called Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. And it's all part of what they believe their role is in life, to repair the world. And charity, Jewish people, are so, right at the top of anything that's charitable. Anything, when there's a disaster, you find that the Israelis, the IDF, are among the first there, anywhere in the world, even Muslim countries, they're there to help. And they're not doing it for virtual signalling. They don't do that. They do it because they feel compelled to do it, because that's who they are. You know, Israel, and this is it. This is what the enemy wants you to believe, the opposite to what things actually are. So the implication behind death to the IDF is that the IDF is worth killing because they're so indescribably evil. In fact, we know, and I know this has been said by commentators that are probably more on our side, but the IDF is the most moral army there's ever been. And I'm not going to sort of go into that. But I was troubled going back to what happened at Glastonbury. I was troubled. So I felt I had to go to Israel. I booked a flight to Israel for November, and I went there for a long weekend because there's something within me, I needed to prove to myself that the IDF are not worthy of being killed. You know, it sounds I needed to identify with my people like never before. It's something new that I think the Lord is doing with me, and perhaps other Jewish people are sort of finding that as well. I've never been an activist in my whole life, certainly not on this issue, but suddenly you're drawn into it, and I felt I had to act. So I went to Israel, and first place I went to was Ammunition Hill. I don't know if you've been there. Ammunition Hill it's absolutely fascinating. It's where the Six-Day War, as you know, 1967, right at the end, they liberated Jerusalem. It was interesting because it was never the intention of liberating Jerusalem, but obviously God had plans. And this was the place where it all started, Ammunition Hill, just not too far from the old city. And it was a memorial to all those that fought and died. And it was just so moving. It had a gallery of all the men that were killed in combat to retake Jerusalem. And they were just ordinary people. They weren't sort of soldiers. They were, well, a lot of them were ex-Holocaust survivors or sons and daughters of them. They were farmers. They were ordinary people, but they were bearing arms to defend their country, you know. And also, you know, they've got a great big sort of plaque there about the IDF, and there's a sort of a motto. It's called the Spirit of the IDF, which is interesting. So when you think about what the world thinks of the IDF, and then you realise the moral code that they live under, which is not just from the Bible, but it's sort of common humanity as well. Everything that they do is undergirded by a morality that you don't get with any other army, I believe. And I hear that from people like Richard Kemp and Andrew Fox, who are ex-army, British Army, and they've seen the situation. They've been with the IDF from inside, and they can corroborate that this is no ordinary army. So I'm in Jerusalem, and I was the only one there for some reason in this Ammunition Hill, and I gave them my books, and they were quite happy. We had a nice chat, and then they said, if I came back 2 days later, I'd actually meet a real-life commando, someone who's actually there liberating Jerusalem. He'd be in his 80s now, or 70s or 80s, and I had the opportunity to meet him. So I got very, very excited until when I turned up, he never turned up. Thought, you know, I was ready to cry. She could see my lower lip was trembling, and she took my number and said, we'll call you when he comes. And I think, I'm going back to London tomorrow, but never mind. The thought was there, but it's just amazing to meet a real life warrior. Would have been. They call them the Warriors. That's the name for them. So later that day, I went down to the Western Wall. So the Western Wall, obviously the Wailing Wall, and it was a Shabbat. And I've done this before, but I wanted to really soak it in this time. So if you go to the Wailing Wall, Western Wall, better, sort of an hour or so before Shabbat starts, and you can see everyone coming in from all over. And it's just absolutely amazing how it fills up so quickly. And by the wall, you'll get all the men with the big hats, and they're swaying, they're davening by the wall, and then they've got these little like lecterns all over the place, and there's little services going on, maybe 100, and they're all at the same time, and they're singing and they're dancing, and I'm looking at that, and then I'm looking behind me at the plaza behind me, where which is the more secular area. And in the plaza, you had the IDF soldiers, all young men, young women with their uniforms on, with their Uzis on their back, and they're smoking fag, but they were just full of joy. They were full of joy because it was the Shabbat. They may not have been religious, but they were singing folk songs. They were dancing. You had some of them were dressed in white, and the men were dancing in circles, and the women separately. And all you saw was joy and sort of purity. And I looked at that, and I thought, you know something, 2,000 miles away in Glastonbury, a similar group of people are demanding the death of these people that I'm seeing. And then that really got to me. And then I realised, well, I know now, God has spoken to me, and we all have to do what we can to defend Jewish people from what's happening. If it's so easy to become anti-Semitic without any conscience at all, and a lot of those people in those marches, they're middle-aged, middle class, but they're spouting hatred. And they think it's okay. It's become acceptable to be anti-Semitic. So we need to do something about this. And so God's calling me into something, not too sure what. But going back to sort of Tikkun Olam, it's interesting because if you think about it, this goes back, was it Iraq? One of those countries, when it first seemed that a Muslim country was going to get sort of material for a nuclear bomb, atomic warfare, whatever, that the Israelis just bombed them. The whole world had to go, and this was about 20 years ago. The Israelis just got in their planes and bombed it out of sight. They were protecting the world. What they did last year with Iran, they are protecting the world. The world didn't really, Trump helped. Most of the world were saying, oh, you mustn't do that, they're a sovereign nation, all that. But, Israel act where everyone else just talks about stuff and says, oh, we must be, diplomacy is what we must, it's what Keir Starmer would say, diplomacy. But Israel acts. And that's a very Jewish thing. And it brings me to a Yiddish word that I found on a podcast, and I mention it right at the end of the book, and it's become a driving force for me now. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's tachlis. Heard of tachlis? Probably not, because I hadn't heard of it before. Those of you who know my mum, I don't know where Tony is, but my mum had a lot of tachlis. Right, tachlis is basically saying, just shut up and get on with it. My mum used to turn up to meetings of the Tree of Life when in her 80s, and she used to basically tell them all to shut up and just stop talking and do something and in her 80s. And that's a very Jewish thing. And I think that's what Israel does, and Jewish people of action. And the world doesn't like it. The world thinks that peace can come through, the Neville Chamberlains of this world, let's just be diplomatic. If we say enough nice things to Putin or the Islamic regime, they'll settle down, everything will be nice. But Israel knows better. Jewish history has told us that we can never, ever be sort of clear of the hatred. When you think now that Zionism is such a swear word, and do they not know what Zionism is? All Zionism is a desire to go back to your country. And do they not realise that Jewish people have been kicked out of every country that they've ever been in? Isn't it right for them to want their own country? But Zionists, the word has just changed. That every positive word to do with Jewish people has been turned round and made into a negative word. And you have to say that the enemy has been very, very clever. He's found enough useful idiots in this world to actually promote his, and a lot of them in the Christian world as well. And that is my main thrust is the Christian world, because I don't see any improvement in churches over the last 2 years. I speak to a lot of leaders, messianic leaders, and it's harder to get churches to, talk about Israel because they're governed by fear now, So anti-Semitism is there, already, and now it's fear for themselves. So what do you think God thinks of all of this? I mean, what's the point of a church? You might as well just have a social club and be done with it. If you want a church, a group of people who are with God and are doing God's will, then they have to be positive towards the Jewish people, or at least not to be negative. And it's up to us to change. We need tacklists. So we're proposing something in a few weeks' time. I'm going to get together, there's a few of us, sort of leaders, or maybe not leaders, just a few concerned individuals. We're going to get together and we're going to do tacklists. We're going to talk about what we could do to comfort Israel and what we're going to do to help the church to understand Israel. Because it's time that we stood up and were counted, really. And that's all of us. So, so what else am I going to talk about? Right. How much longer have I got? Because I didn't take a note of the time when I started. Right. It's Jewish people becoming believers. It's when I became a believer, which was 35 years ago, or whatever. When my mum became a believer, she had a real problem for a long time. Her problem was with Jesus, because it is part of our DNA not to trust that person, that name. And I can understand that because I felt it a bit too. And I think maybe a lot of Jewish people, when they come through, because we've been killed under the name of Jesus. Crusaders with their crosses on their shield has been, in the first crusade, killing thousands of Jews and burning them alive in their synagogues, and then going off and singing songs of praise. That's what Jewish people see. Muslims as well, that's what they see from the church. And what we need to realise is that people need to know who the real Jesus is. And there have been, at last, a lot of Christians now know that Jesus was Jewish, and there's still some that don't. And even some are even saying the word Yeshua, which is good. So we're getting there, but trying to get people, churches, just to have a Passover to understand the background to the Last Supper is still a problem, because what would the community say? What happens if the Muslims on the far left find out? And I went to a Holocaust Memorial Day. I don't know, some of you might have been there. You've been there, at Brentwood. A very, very well done. Moira, our friend Moira, did it. There's about 100 people there in Brentwood. Yeah, you were there. Yeah, and you had the local MP was there. You had the mayor was there, and there was no security. I'm thinking, wow, and it wasn't needed because no one came and there was no problems outside. The fact is, there was meant to be security, but the bloke forgot to come. As far as that's what Moira told me afterwards. But the fact is that this fear, and I think it's fear that is driving a lot of Christians into sort of backing away from this subject. They have to realise that fear is the enemy of faith. And if they are fearful about this, then they're not being faithful to their God. And that needs to be sort of driven home to them. So there's a lot of work needing to be done here, because Jewish people, until they can see a change in the church, they're not going to trust us. And they need their Messiah. They need hope. If I was a Jewish unbeliever and I could see the rise of anti-Semitism, which in my view is the worst it's been for 700 years in this country. Forget about Nazi Germany, that was in Germany and that was in Central Europe. But, you have to go back to the 13th century for when there was, the blood libels and, all the other, the host desecration and all the really, really anti-Jewish stuff, which culminated with all the Jews being kicked out of our country and then kicked out of France and Spain and all the other countries. We're at that level of hatred. A survey was done recently where I think 65% of Jewish people think there's no future for them in our country. And can you imagine that? What has Jewish people given our country? When you think of those that have risen to the top in all spheres of work, from entertainment to politics and whatever, and because of the hatred that has come out, through the most recent manifestation of anti-Semitism, which is the Islamists, that's what the devil is using at the moment. In the past, he would have used the Nazis, or before that, there would have been the Cossacks and all that. At the moment, it's the extreme Muslim community that's driving all this. But, Christians need to stand up against it, because the government won't. They might talk with their mouths, but there's no tachlis. Where is the tachlis? Because Keir Starmer keeps saying he's, on his watch the Jews will be saved. He's done absolutely nothing. It's all talk, and even my local MP, who is unfortunately in the cabinet, this is an interesting one, because my wife went to church and he was there taking communion. And this was West Streeting. Now, West Streeting was, I don't want to defame him too much, but he was a real friend of the Jews. And he really had real tachlis when Jeremy Corbyn was around. He was a thorn in the side of Jeremy Corbyn. And I noted that at the time, and it was very, all honour to him. But now our constituency where we are is becoming more and more Muslim by the day. It used to be Jewish, now it's Muslim, and he's thinking, right, I've got to appease the Muslims. And that's not having a go at him, that's just our politicians. They just want to survive for the next 3 years and then hand the mess over to someone else. There's nothing long term, it's just hanging on. They used to have principles in politics, and I'm not into politics at all, but what I've seen over the last 2 years has just made me realise that Jesus is our only hope, because you can't trust man. Whatever they might say, their words and their actions are normally not connected at all. I can just keep ranting on and on, but I won't, because I'm doing these conferences now where I speak for 3 hours and it goes all over the place, and we do make it interactive. I don't know if any of you got any comments or questions. Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm a Jewish believer,
Yeah.
and I've seen the attitude of churches that I've been in.
Yeah.
And one thing that's predominantly more and more dominant, I hear what you said about Christians being afraid of supporting Jews. I think there's a bigger root problem with it, and I think that's mainly Reformed theology, Calvinism from Augustine, because that's where, if you look at that, and you look at writings about that, when after the first 300 years of being under the apostles' teaching and following biblical principles, once Constantine politically became trying to keep Patrimana in Rome, decided to do it in Christianity and incorporated everything pagan. And from that came Roman Catholicism. From that came Augustine, Council of Nicaea, Augustine of Hippo, through Calvin in Geneva.
You've been on a course, haven't you? You've been on... I totally agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Most of the churches I've been in recently, one I had to leave because I was attacked for saying that we've got free will. It is Reformed theology, and they will not pray for Israel. They'll pray for every country under the sun. They will not pray for Israel. They think the church is spiritually is the spiritual Israel, and God's finished with Israel. It's not biblical. Jeremiah 31, God cut the new covenant with Israel and Judah.
Well done. I don't know whether that was picked up on the microphone, but that was a very good exposition there, and I totally agree with you. And into that mix comes anti-Semitism, and the devil is just pulling the strings. And when you get the situation of someone like N.T. Wright, who is like the preeminent theologian in our country, who is into replacement theology, who would actually suggest that Israel is an accident. And I'd like to sit him down with someone like Tony and take him through the last 2 years and say, so this was an accident, was it? All these things that happened in the last 2 years, 5 nations surrounding them, plus the media, plus UN and all that. And yet, according to economists, Israel is stronger now than it was 2 years ago, in terms of the shekel and its economy and all that. So, sorry, there's other people.
I'll say just a few words.
Yeah.
Came across a very, very good podcast. Come across a very good podcast from the late John MacArthur. Now, you couldn't get anybody more 5-point Calvinist.
No.
Those who understand what that really means. A lot of us don't understand what it means. But anyway, he was a 5-point Calvinist. He gave a podcast on why all Calvinists should be premillennial.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was very, very good.
Mm.
Really spot on. So it's not all reform, but I clearly understand that some of the reform folk are very, very good. I was in a reform church and they recovered my faith. They really are. There's evangelism to the Muslims, they've got their tables up. When it comes to Israel, there seems to be a blind spot.
Yeah.
But I'm working on it.
Good.
And I've given this from John MacArthur.
Yeah. That's good. Well, he's gone now, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the word you say is blind spot, and it's the key word, total blind spot that the church has regarding to Israel.
Just a practical thing, a book I read years ago, it's a very small book, oh thanks, a helpful little book, it's not long. It's by a man called Rob Richards, who had been an Anglican minister. It was, replacement. And the Lord absolutely spoke to him. And the book is called Has God Finished with Israel? And it's an excellent, simple, clear book of the testimony of this man who was replacement. No one persuaded him. The Lord spoke to him. Yeah. And it's just a really good book to read. It could be given to any... I've given it to a few different Christians. Yeah. And it says it all in a very...
Yeah, I've read that book. And it was the book that inspired me when I wrote my first Land of Many Names book. So it is, good book, yeah.
Have you got anything to say about the conservatives who were traditionally pro-Israel that are turning now? And they're even more vociferous than some of the left-wing people.
Really?
Especially in America.
Oh, in America. The rise of the far right, I'm afraid, we've all been concentrating on the far left, not realising the far right have been waiting for their moment. And now Israel is stuck in a pincher movement between the two. So you've got Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and all that. And they're feeding into a different, let's say, anti-Jewish trope. And what they're feeding into is Jews control the world. That's their big thing, conspiracy. And they're getting millions of followers because it tickles the ear. So you've got the left with their particular hatred. You've got the right with their particular hatred, and you've got the devil pulling the strings. And that's the only way of seeing it. Yeah.
By Qatar as well.
Yeah, Qatar, the money coming in from Qatar that's paying for the whole thing.
Socialism is anti-Semitic and it's more socialist.
Yeah. Well, remember, Hitler was a national socialist, But, am I running over time? Should I not be allowing people to talk? Right. Yeah, go on, at the back.
Could I just say, can I just say something to the mic? It also goes through into charities because I'm sort of retired now, but as a graphic designer, I was called to design a brochure for Tear Fund. And when I was there, I noticed all the pictures that they were using were all, Bethlehem and in so-called Palestine. Yeah. And I said to the lady who was running it, I said, have you got anything actually from the Jewish side, because you think it's Tear Fund. And then she looked at me and smiled. She said, well, actually, we support the other side. Yeah, and they all do. They all do. And that's just the way it came. And that's a Christian charity as well. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Christian Aid is another example, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just from the Jewish point of view, we had a discussion with somebody quite high up in the Jewish community here, and we were talking about using this building for an event for them. And he was very keen on us being pro-Israel and against anti-Semitism. But he said, I'm worried that you use it for evangelism. So I said, well, we are evangelical Christians. We do believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and if you want to ask us that, we'll tell you that. But we're also pro-Israel, and we're going to stand with you whatever the situation is. And also in the conversation, what came out was that basically, if you look at the main antichrist forces, anti-Christian, today, Islam and the far left, communism. Two forces which come together against Israel.
Yeah.
And the Jewish community is actually cottoning on to it. He cottoned on to it. He said, I can see that.
Yeah.
That we have the same enemy, if you like.
Yeah.
And therefore we should cooperate.
Yeah. That's funny,
And I think there's a battle within the Jewish community. I mean, I talked to Melanie Phillips as well.
Yeah.
And she was very keen on us being pro-Israel and pro the Jews. But when I said that her book actually uses a title which comes from the Psalms, which is also quoted in the New Testament, she really backed off and said, you're trying to appropriate our scriptures.
Oh.
And I said, well, it's not. It's quoted. The verse is what the stone the builders rejected has become the chief of the corner, which has got 5 minutes in the New Testament.
I think this is,
and you've got this battle which is in the Jewish community between, they want us to be pro-Israel, they want us to be anti-Semitism, they don't want us to tell us about Jesus.
Yeah.
The other thing which came up with this man I was talking to was that the liberal kind of church which the Jews used to relate to, like in the Council of Christians and Jews, tends to be now anti-Israel. The ones who are pro-Israel are groups like us who are evangelical.
Yeah.
And I think you can see there's a problem there, because they like the liberals who won't tell them about Jesus. They like us if we are pro-Israel, but they don't like us if we tell them about Jesus.
But that's why they need to hear more about our groups. And, our PR, just like Israel's PR is so bad, well, our PR isn't good either. We need to be speaking to the Jews as the Jews need to be speaking to the world. It's just communication. Communication.
More unity amongst the Jews, the Christian pro-Israel.
Yeah.
Because often we spend our time attacking each other as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody wants
Yeah, I watched a documentary when you mentioned the 6-Day War earlier.
Yeah.
And apparently, right at the end, they actually captured Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And they raised the flag, but they were told to take the flag back down. And so I just wanted to, if you had any insight on what your thoughts
Well, Moshe Dayan, I believe, was asked whether he should blow the mosque up. And he said no, and which was quite an interesting answer. I wondered they probably could have got away with it at that time because they were victors. How that may have changed history if they'd done that. But they were always respectful. You see, when Jordan was in charge of the old city, they demolished all the Jewish areas, the synagogues, the cemeteries. They had no respect. And the same thing happened when the Jews left Gaza. No respect at all. But, any Arab is able to come into Old City and go to their mosques and all that. There's just a big difference, So, yeah.
What I'm understanding here, or maybe misunderstanding, and that's kind of why I'm asking the question, it seems to be a very either-or situation. Like, to be supportive of Islam is to be anti-Semitic, and to be supportive of Israel is to be anti-Islam. I can't quite understand this kind of either-or situation.
Yeah, well, that's sort of, it's artificial. It's the same thing. Anti-Israel is the same as anti-Semitic.
I get that. To be supportive of A, people will understand that as being not supportive or even hatred of B.
Yeah.
And that applies in many situations.
Yeah, it is the same, and our world is very black and white. And at the moment, everything is polarised. We used to have a very forgiving sort of culture when you think of the cosy old days of Heath and Wilson, where, you know, the left and the right, you know, they had the differences, but they were close to the centre. Now you've got the left over there and the right over there, and they absolutely hate each other, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of compromise between the two. And the only thing that unites them tends to be the hatred of Israel. But then we have to not be polarised as well. So we mustn't show hatred towards the Arab people or the Palestinians. And we have to demonstrate that. It's very easy for us to show hatred. You know, it's a natural thing. I mean, we've had our whole lives being battered, you know, 2,000 years. But, you know, we have to show that we're not the same as our persecutors. And we have to, especially if we're Christian believers like you are, it's harder, isn't it? Very hard not to be dragged down, you know.
And that is one of the problems. You see, like, the settlers in the West Bank doing, chopping down Arab trees and doing all that kind of stuff. It really doesn't help. And there are things where, you know, we're pro-Israel, but we're not pro everything that Israel does.
No,
and there are certain things which Israel does, particularly in relation to the Arabs, which, you know, are definitely not right.
No.
That's somehow we've got to get that across.
The trouble is that you know, even if like half a dozen Israeli settlers are doing something, that becomes headline news. That's the problem. We got to watch ourselves 100% of the time. It only takes 1% of us to do something, and the world would jump on it. You know, that's the problem.
For every settler attack on an Arab, there were 4 attacks by Arabs on settlers.
Yeah, well, that doesn't get into the news. That doesn't get into the news. No.
I'll just a note of optimism. I went on the march yesterday because I heard there were 2 marches. I was in town anyway.
Yeah.
And I never participated, but I just observed. Because of the rise of social media and people carrying phones, they don't think. So the chant that you heard at Glastonbury has actually been banned.
Really?
Yeah. But they still do it. They're not allowed megaphones anymore.
No.
And what they do, there's a whole parade of them. There's this union and that union. It's all union-based.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
The vast majority of the people just don't care. A lot of bystanders just looking around, tut-tutting.
Yeah.
Right? So what they do, they have this parade of people. Then they have this drumming, about 25 drums.
Yeah.
And then they kind of hypnotise the young. There's mainly young people in front.
Yeah.
And then someone shouts, you know, dead.
Yeah.
And it's like a nursery rhyme.
Yeah,
it
is.
Children. Some of them are age here, and they're like children.
Yeah.
It's like a nursery.
I know.
They don't know what they're talking about.
They don't.
And then when you get, and you're given lots of free newspapers, or you have to give a pound in the socialist world. They're absolutely frightened of the numbers that the far right get. And they because the police say how many numbers, and I know how many people it takes to fill Trafalgar Square, 3,000 or 4,000.
Yeah.
There were about 5,000 yesterday.
That's not many.
No, there were 500,000 for the Tommy Robinson far right.
There's more than that. I think there's more than that.
Right, and it says it in the newspaper.
But the thing is, it wasn't far right. That's the thing. Ordinary people. Ordinary people.
In their socialist newspapers, they say we have to mobilise because Robinson's going to get 500,000 in May, and they cannot match that.
No.
Right. So the unwashed majority who don't really care do come out.
Yeah.
The only other march there yesterday. The march, the Palestinian march started at Russell Square, goes down Holborn, if you know London.
Yeah.
Winds around, takes a sharp right down the Old Witch, goes to Trafalgar Square that way.
Yeah.
The UKIP march.
Yeah. Oh, they were marching as well.
Yeah, the UKIP march. I don't know who runs UKIP now, but it came from Hyde Park Corner, right the way down Piccadilly. And by the time they got to Trafalgar Square, there was barely 200 of them. I don't know how many there were at the start. They sing songs, like us at the beginning. I don't know where they get it from, right? And it's just white, kind of, it looks like white supremacists. They're quite a dangerous lot. But again, the police presence is very, very low-key.
Yeah, well, anyway, I'm probably going on a bit long now, because everyone wants to talk.
Thank you, Steve. I'm just reminded of Proverbs 8, verse 36. It says, "But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death."
Yeah, that's totally.
If someone can sing, death to the idea, they love death.
And they are damaging their souls. And one day they're going to be accountable for what they've done, particularly as a lot of them are quite intelligent. Think of all those students and professors and what they've been saying. You know, you've only got to read Douglas Murray's latest book to find out what's been going on in the colleges, and it's awful, you know. So, but there'll be an accounting for all these people, you know, if not in this world, in the next. So, maybe that should be the last one at the back then.
That could be quite appropriate, actually. I heard a really beautiful quote which all stemmed, obviously, from the Gaza and Israel conflict, but obviously it's been going on for years. So the Palestinians are fighting for God's land. Israel is fighting to stay in God's land. But unfortunately, none of them know the God that owns the land. And so it just goes to show that who do we need in our lives? Who does the world need? And that's Yeshua.
Absolutely. God owns the land, that's the thing. That's why he doesn't like it when we mess about with it, you know. But I think we'll end there. I don't know if you need to be out at a certain time, but anyway. Right, what now?
I'm going to sing.
Are you going to sing?
Thank you, Steve.